You ready, Dawn? Good evening and welcome. It's with great honor that I announce tonight's special and treasured guest, Lenny Foster. Lenny is the former director of the Navajo Nation Prison Counseling Corrections Department and the spiritual advisor to Leonard Peltier and more than 2,000 incarcerated Native Americans in 96 state and federal prisons in the Western United States. Mr. Foster has co-authored legislation in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, allowing Native Americans spiritual and religious practice in prison. Welcome, Mr. Foster. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, long. Dikaya donen slinige ki ani slon sastani was es centrobai das che. Enegani das nal egot na be khon slon hit hatte se. Ba hen sind die kwe nicht ngadi na ton hit hatte chi slon nerigi. I want to express my appreciation for the opportunity at this time to be with you, spend this time with you. I introduce myself as a Tarn-House clan born from Mountain Cove. My maternal grandparents are River Edge, and my paternal grandparents are Nomad, one who walks around, and that's how we introduce ourselves within the Dene community and peoples. And that's how we introduce ourselves, not only to each other, but we're told that the spirits understand who we are by introducing ourselves in the language and the clan that we belong to. So as I said, I'm a Kia'ani, that's a Tarn-House, born for Mountain Cove. And my Chase is Tropahe, that's River Edge, and my Nollies are Inagani, that's one who walks around. So there's 4 clans, and that's part of the teachings that I used to take into the prison system as per the introduction by my sister there. I visited over 96 correctional facilities, state prisons and federal penitentiaries. And there's a difference. The state prisons are under the jurisdiction of the state courts in the states, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah. But the Federal Bureau of Prison is under the jurisdiction of the FBI, federal marshals, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and the federal courts, U.S. Attorney. So there's a big difference. The majority of our Native people are from the reservation, Indian reservation. So they're in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And I started this work as a volunteer spiritual advisor in 1981, March of 1981 in Florence, Arizona. I was going to graduate school, Arizona State University, and another brother that was working at the Indian Center approached me. His name was Wayne Wakazu from Santee, North Dakota, and he asked me if I was interested in doing some work in the prisons because he knew at Sundance. And he had a sweat lodge behind his house. And this was in Phoenix, Arizona in March of 1981. So I agreed to it. I said, let's do it. So we took some red willows. We went out and harvested and cut some red willows. Red willows are different from green willows. But the red willows, you need to use it right away and then put it up because it dries real fast. Whereas the green willows has a lot of moisture in it and it lasts a little longer before it dries. But once it dries, you have it built, tied together, boy, it's solid, very solid. So that's what we did at the Arizona State Prison. And that's how I began my work. And I had known Leonard Peltier since 1970. I met him in the streets of Denver, Colorado, right there on Colfax Avenue. I ran into him. He didn't know me and I didn't know him, but we were both natives. Uh, we started talking and we got acquainted. And I seen him off and on the streets there in Denver. And he asked me what I was doing in Colorado, Denver. I told him I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm going to school, Colorado State University. And he kind of chuckled, and because he was an iron worker, but he was traveling through Denver. So he told me what he was doing and where he was going, but he wanted to know about the AIM chapter in Denver. I said, well, there is an office right down the street in the Vernon Belcourt is the director of the AIM chapter in Denver, Denver AIM. So that's how we became acquainted. And I ran into him again up at Cass Lake, Minnesota in 1972. And I think he was at Gordon, Nebraska, which was also an AIM action up in Gordon, Nebraska over the killing of Raymond Yellow Thunder. That happened late February, early March, 1972. And we all converged. At that time, I was riding with Vernon Belcourt and Denver AIM. So we met again, and many other young people that were affiliated with the American Indian Movement from Cleveland, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rapid City, right there, Denver, Seattle, places like that where the chapters were formed. So that's how I had my beginnings, and I ran into Leonard Peltier, and we hit it off because we were both young, idealistic, becoming more aware of our commitments to helping our people, namely the treaty rights. Those were issues that we were becoming informed or aware of. So that I had that opportunity to meet him and became a real close acquaintance with him. Then I know that he was involved in that shootout there in Jumping Bull Compound, June 25th, 1975, I think it is. And they were apprehended him up in Canada. And that was done through devious ways and means with the FBI in the Federal Bureau of Prison, the Justice Department. They coerce witnesses, they intimidated and threatened communities and families. So that's how they were able to get some of the young natives to speak and identify Leonard, Bob Robidoux, Dino Butler. And they were able to hunt Leonard down in Canada. And I had just heard about it because I was, like I said, I was in school, and I finished there Colorado State and got a bachelor's of sociology. And once I finished, I went back to Fort Defiance, Arizona, Navajo Nation. But I kept up with what Leonard was doing. And I ran into him at the Sundance at Crow Dog's Paradise, Rosebud, South Dakota in August of 1975. And we Sundanced there together. And I remember Leonard was left a real impression with me because he pierced the first day. If you know anything about the sweat or the Sundance, you know, to do something like that, the pierce the first day, and then you're staked out 4 days under the hot sun and you're dancing. You don't sit under the arbor in the shade. that's a real tough way to do it, do the Sundance. And he did that. And I knew this by looking at him, I could see this bro was tough. And so I talked to him while he was staked out in the evening, because we dance all day, about 8 hours a day. You start at 7 o'clock in the morning. After the sweat, we march out to the arbor and start dancing, and we dance all day with short breaks. And we're out there till about 6:30 in the evening. And the sun is still up. This is in South Dakota now, and it's hot. And Crow Dog, Leonard Crow Dog and his father, Henry Crow Dog, were, they kept that Sundance alive. It went underground for many, many years, maybe close to 80 years or 90 years. The government had outlawed the Sundance. The government had outlawed the pipe ceremonies, no dancing. The government said, we don't want you Indians dancing. We want you to burn your medicine bundles, burn your sweat lodge, cut your hair, speak English, go to school, become a Christian. And that was very intensive, very intensive. Just think about that. If you're a Christian or you're Jewish or Islamic and you're told to do away with your beliefs and become the way that the Caucasian, Anglo, white person wants you to be. They did that to us, the American Indian, the First Nations of North America and Western Hemisphere. So there was a lot of anger, resentment towards that, because we wanted to speak our language. We wanted to practice our culture, and we wanted to be Indian. And Crow Dog and his family kept the Sundance alive. They kept the Sweat Lodge alive. So when AIM formed, they went to Dennis Banks and Clyde Balcourt went to see him, Henry Crow Dog and Leonard Crow Dog. Leonard Crow Dog was a young medicine man at that time, and his father never let him go to school. Henry Crow Dog had a vision that you put these young Indians into school, they'll lose their language, they lose the songs, they lose the culture. So he didn't allow his son Leonard Crow Dog to go to school in Rosebud. That's near Mission, South Dakota, just north of Valentine. So I'm sharing this information that I heard from Leonard Crow Dog himself. So just bear with me as I try to give you a little background on this. You might have heard it different, or but this is what I'm sharing. What Leonard Peltier, myself, people like the young AIM. We were young. I was 21 years old. I'm 74 now, and Leonard's going to be 78 here. September 12th or 14th, I think, is his birthday. It's coming up, and he's going to be 78 years old. He's 4 years older than me. So when I met him, I was 21, so he was 25 already. And so the information, the stories that was given to the American Indian movement, that the Sundance was one of the important ancient ceremonial practices of this new movement. And Crow Dog said, we're not going to be like any other organization. We're going to have a movement. It's going to be a spiritual based movement. No alcohol, no drugs. Use the Sweat Lodge. And I want all of you to Sundance. And Sundance it's very, it's tough. It's not an easy ceremony. I don't come from a Sundance culture. I'm a Dene, Navajo, Southwest Indian. And but because of the uh, proximity to South Dakota, the upper Midwest plains, I was able to travel from Fort Collins to Pine Ridge and Rosebud, and it was a short 5-6 hour drive. So I was able to become involved that way by driving up to Pine Ridge, to Gordon, Nebraska, to Crow Dog's Paradise, Rosebud. And Crow Dog, like I said, was our medicine man, our spiritual leader. And he knew all the songs, the prayers. He encouraged all of us to go back to our ways. And that was the first order of the day, was to start learning your traditional beliefs, your culture. The language is very important. And Leonard was there. Leonard, we sundanced together. Most of all the young AIM people were encouraged to sundance. And it was AIM, American Indian Movement. Russell Means, Dennis Banks, Carter Camp, Clyde Valcourt, Leonard Peltier, myself, people like that. We went out and sundance. I did it for 26 years, from 1973 to 1999. And I had the opportunity to sundance with Crow Dog up there in Crow Dog's Paradise, Big Mountain in Arizona, because he brought the Sundance to the Navajo Reservation, Big Mountain, Arizona. And now that Sundance is practiced in the Southwest, but Crow Dog was the person responsible for sharing the ancient ceremonial practice that brought us together. And the Sweat Lodge also. We had our different forms, ways of using the Sweat Lodge. Our Dene Sweat House, we don't use water. There's a lot of dry heat and a lot of songs, long prayers. Whereas the Lakota, the Plains Indian style, is they use a lot of water, rocks. I think they use limestone. We use lava rocks. And so that was how we were able to share. And Leonard was right there, part of that whole beginning of this movement. Now it's almost 50 years ago. Well, I've known him for 52 years, from 1970 to the present day. But he was one of the original members. His group was from the Northwest, Seattle and Portland, that area. And he with people like Dino Butler, Steve Robidoux, Bob Robidoux, Angel Martinez, people like that. And whereas I was in Denver with Vernon Balcourt, Rod Skinandor, Wallace Black Elk, Jess Large, Jim Large, people like that, Joe and Vivian Locus, just people that I remember. There's others whose names I have forgotten, but it'll come back to me. So this movement started growing as a result of really what it came down to was the Bureau of Indian Affairs, police, the FBI, state, city police. They don't want to do anything. They'll put you in jail, beat you up. But if there was any killings or murder, they don't to investigate. Only if it was the victim, then they prosecute the Indian to the fullest extent, put you in jail, send you to prison. So that was the atmosphere in the 1970s. And Alcatraz was one of the first action in the movement. I went to Alcatraz in 1970. That was a takeover of Alcatraz Island. And the issue there was to reclaim any lands, property that the government had taken. And if they just declared surplus and just leave it behind, it was automatically be given back to the Indian people. So we claim Alcatraz with that understanding. And then the Lakotas that were involved in that used the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty and the provisions in that says any land that has been abandoned, declared surplus, it goes back to the Indian people, the Indian nations. So the students from San Francisco State College and from University of California, Berkeley, they organized themselves and they were led by Richard Oakes, Lenada Means, people like that. And I had some friends there, Pat Janiha, he was a Navajo, Frank Burnside, who was also a Navajo. I knew them from my childhood and they were there. Frank was going to Berkeley and Pat was a student at San Francisco State College. So when I went out there, I hitchhiked from Fort Collins. Remember, I went to Colorado State. I was a student in my third year at Colorado State. So during the Christmas break in December 1970, I got out on the highway and hitchhiked out of Fort Collins to Laramie, Laramie to Rock Springs to Salt Lake City over Donner Pass to Sacramento, and Sacramento on into San Francisco. And I didn't know anybody until I ran into Pat Jania. He introduced me to Richard Oakes, Al Miller, Joe Bill. Then I ran into Frank Burnside, and he introduced me to Lenada Means. Lenada Means now is a leader among her Shoshone Bannock, Fort Hall, Idaho, and she's known by Dr. Lenada Warjack, and she certainly deserves that recognition to be acknowledged as the leader of this takeover of Alcatraz. And that was the spark that set off the movement. And AIM was formed in the cell blocks of Minnesota State Prison, Dennis Banks and Clyde Balcourt in the 60s. So we all started coming together as a result of the action at Alcatraz, 1970, 71. And then there was a killing in Gordon, Nebraska in February the 28th, I believe, in 1972 in Gordon, Nebraska, where Raymond Yellow Thunder was kidnapped and abducted by some young ranchers. And he was intoxicated, so they gave him more alcohol, and then they beat him. They threw his body into the trunk of a car. His family went to the city police, Gordon, Nebraska. They didn't want to do nothing because it was an Indian. So they went to the state police, and again, the state police didn't do anything. They asked the BIA for help. BIA wouldn't do nothing. And then they even tried to contact, the family tried to contact the FBI to see if they'd do anything. No, they don't do nothing too. It's an Indian. So the family, Raymond Yellow Thunder's family, went to the American Indian Movement, Russell Means, and told him that, nephew, we need your help here. Our daddy, our uncle, was beaten to death, and they threw him in the cops' They don't want to do nothing. We want Ames help. So the call went out March the 1st, 1972, an American Indian movement. Indian people converged on Gordon, Nebraska. Maybe 5,000 people, 10,000 people, Indians came. The white people of Gordon, Nebraska freaked out. They didn't realize there were this many Indians that had concern. They wanted justice. So the mayor and the governor, the white representatives had no choice but to sit down and with the American Indian Movement leadership. So that was considered a success as far as the request for justice. So they indicted those two ranchers, but they were charged with involuntary manslaughter, and I think they only got 18 months or something. Now, if it was an Indian that did that, he would probably get the death sentence, life in prison without parole. So there's a double standard of justice. And we exposed that. The American Indian Movement exposed that. Leonard was part of that. I was part of that. And at that time, our main leaders were Russell Means, Clyde Belcourt, Vernon Belcourt, Dennis Banks. And Leonard was just a warrior like me, and young warriors. So the next action after that was Cass Lake, Minnesota, which became a fishing right hunting issue. The white, they call themselves sportsmen. They went on to the Cass Lake, Leech Lake, Chippewa reservation, and they were fishing and not paying for any license to fish or to hunt. They would come on and shoot deer and elk, didn't pay for it, nothing. They didn't think they had to do that. And again, the Indian citizens of Cass Lake and Leech Lake asked for the help from the American Indian Movement. So another call went out. I remember I was in school. I was at my apartment, Fort Collins, Colorado. I was a student at Colorado State, and I was there. Vernon Belcourt came to my house. It was in the evening, banging on the door. So I opened the door, and he says, "Come on, let's go." I said, "Where are we going?" He said, "We're going to Cass Lake, Minnesota, Leech Lake." And I knew it was an AIM action. So I went and got my stuff and jumped in with them. And Leonard was one of the head of security. That's where I really got acquainted with him, because I saw him in a whole different light. He was the head of all the warriors of security. He was carrying a rifle. The rest of us were carrying rifles too. And we manned the roadblocks. And that was a success. We were there maybe 10 days, but the order came down from the governor's office that any people that are not from that reservation going on to the reservation to hunt and fish are required to buy a license. So that was considered a victory for the Cass Lake Ojibways, Leech Lake Ojibways, because that was what they wanted. They didn't want people from St. Paul and Minnesota just coming onto the reservation and poaching, because that's what it is. You just indiscriminately killing a deer, elk, and fishing. So that changed the whole, started to change. That was 1972, and Leonard was, I guess he gained respect and the trust and the recognition from Dennis Banks, Russell Means, Clyde Belcourt. And I talked with him because we ran into Denver a couple of years before that on the streets right there in Colfax Avenue in Denver, Colorado. So him and I were bros, good bros, and they developed that friendship. So I saw him, we talked, and he knew I was with Denver AIM. And Vernon Balcourt was a very good leader. We all got along with him. The other leaders were Dennis Banks, Russell Means, Clyde Balcourt. They all had their own personalities. Leonard Crodog was our spiritual leader, medicine man. Wallace Black, Eddie Benton Benet was also one of the spiritual leaders, a medicine man. And the one thing I remember about those gentlemen is they conducted very intense, hot sweat lodge ceremonies. It's an ancient ceremonial practice, cleansing and purify yourself, your body, your mind, learning to pray and sing. There's some beautiful songs in that sweat lodge, and some of it all comes out. It's in our DNA as being Indian. It's embedded in us. It just all comes back to us. And the prayers and the songs are like that. You hear it one time, you pick it up. So that was a teaching for all of us. And those spiritual leaders, they really had a big responsibility. And then it was men and women. So Leonard was right there, and he was acknowledged as one of the leaders. And so that was my basis for developing that camaraderie, friendship through the Sundance, through the Sweat Lodge, being on some AIM actions. And that was just a start, because the next AIM action in October, November 1972, we went to Washington, D.C. in a big caravan called the Trail of Broken Treaties caravan. And there are 4 departure points on the West Coast. The one left from Seattle, Washington, that was headed by Russell Means. Then the other one was San Francisco. That was headed by Dennis Banks. And one from Los Angeles, California was Vernon Balcourt. And they went through the Southwest. At that time, I was living in Fort Defiance, Arizona. So when he came through Gallup, New Mexico, he came over to Window Rock, Fort Defiance. We recruited some people to get on the caravan, and it proceeded to Oklahoma. And we all converged in Lawrence, Kansas. By then, it was a big, huge caravan, and then proceeded on up to Mankato, Minnesota. That's where 38 Lakotas were hung at the President Lincoln ordered that when they had a rebellion. So we stopped there and smoked a pipe and prayed. It was a sad moment, but we had returned to appease the spirits of those Lakotas that were hung. So that was a learning also that we can do those things, pray, come together and smoke the chanupa, smoke the pipe, sing the songs. And the spirits, they say, were still in the area, and they came. They were happy that the ancestors were happy that this new generation, 1972, this new generation of the warriors called the American Indian Movement had come together. And so from there, we went to St. Paul, Minnesota. This was in 1972 in October. And the election was only a few weeks. The election in 1972 was in November, but we ended up converging on Washington, D.C. And we went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs building, Department of Interior, and met with the commissioner, Lewis Bruce. He was a Mohawk Indian, I believe, but he was a bureaucrat, short hair, tie, and I think Indians with long hair, braids, chokers, silver, turquoise, feathers, singing. We had a big drum, and they had a big auditorium. So we went in there and took over the auditorium. There was a cafeteria downstairs. So we went down there to eat. 5 o'clock, they told us we had to get out of the building. And by then, it was probably close to 500-600 people. It was growing. Word had gotten out that we had converged on the Bureau of Indian Affairs building, and we were not leaving. So they sent the cops, and the cops tried to storm the building, push people out, and a big fight broke out downstairs in the cafeteria. And we made a stand right there. So for the next 4 or 5 days, we stayed in that building. We slept in that building. And when we were in St. Paul, we met at the Hippodrome. Everybody in the caravan was encouraged to participate in helping develop the 20-point position paper. And I myself participated at Vernon Belcourt's encouragement. He said, "Lenny, you need to go. You're college educated, so we need you to go in there and help Hank Adams write up that 20-point position paper." So I just went and sat in on those meetings, and we all had an input into to giving them what needs to be written in as part of the 20-point position paper. That will be one of your assignments, is to write down, research what the 20-point position paper, the Trail of the Broken Treaties Caravan, the BIA takeover 1972. It's on the internet. All you got to do is type in Google that, what I told you, and then you'll see the 20-point position paper, and you'll see some of the different stipulations or points that we had brought out. One was freedom of religion for Native Americans. Another was restoration of the commissions to study the treaties. Another was to fund some of the programs for the Indian nations across this country, and to really develop the government, the tribal governments. And then another was, it was focused on treaties, that Congress should invite Native American leaders to address Congress and talk about the ratification, the enforcement, the compliance of the treaties that were signed. See, they try to forget, say they don't apply to us anymore, but that's from the time they were signed. A lot of them were signed in 1868. I know the Oglalas and some of the Lakotas, Navajos, we have an 1868 treaty. Our leaders, Ganado Mocho, Manuelito, Narbona, that was their names. They signed the 1868 treaty because our people were forced to walk to Fort Sumner, New Mexico, Bosque Redondo, because we were at war with the United States government. First, it was the Spanish conquistadors, and then the white people, the cavalry, and then just the cowboys and the ranchers that wanted Indian land. That fight still exists today. Now they want our water, Southwest. The water rights are held by the Indian tribes, the Indian nations, but the states of Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, California, they want Indian water. And it's another big fight here. So it never ends. Indian wars, white man wars, they haven't ended. It's still, so, and part of that 20-point position paper, it's in there. And one thing about Hank Adams, Assiniboine Sioux from Montana, very articulate, very sharp. He did most of all the work. He had it in his head. So we have some brilliant minds, scholars. Hank Adams was one of them. John Mohawk was another from the Six Nation Iroquois. And then there are others. I always thought that Vernon Belcourt was very, very sharp, articulate. And Leonard is very, he's smart. He's a talented artist. He's a painter. He's a revered elder. And, he's been down for almost 46 years. He went in when he was 30, maybe 32 years old. And he's not in the best of health. He's going through some hard times. So this long walk that's going on right now, justice for Leonard Peltier, is very important. So he was right. What I'm sharing with you is my perspective, my experience of what I went through with Denver AIM, Vernon Belcourt. But I knew Russell Means, I knew Dennis Banks, and they were strict. I was young, they were older, so I didn't really hang around with them. I hung around more with people like John Carlson, Fuzzy Miller, Percy Casper, younger AIM warriors that we were all same age. So that takeover was intense because the city, Washington, D.C., and the park police, they kept threatening us. They're going to storm the building and they're going to throw us out. And then we smoked the pipe, sang our songs, put on our war paint. And I actually witnessed all of that. And I knew that AIM was for real. They're not playing around here. We got two medicine people that are leading this. Leonard Crow Dog, who comes from a history dating back to Spotted Tail, Jerome Crow Dog, people like that. Their contemporaries were Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Spotted Tail, Red Cloud, people like that. So, we got a lot of history. So when they say we're going to make our stand right here and accepted the paint, I knew that it was for real. And none of the cops, they picked up on that too. They didn't want to come in there. They didn't want to come in the building. And then there's a lot of African-American cops. They chose not even to attempt to come in. They went across the street. And then they were on the other side of the street and they stayed there. These other cops, they didn't want to come in there. We're all in front of the building upstairs. And the thing about the Indian community, the Indian world at that time was very angry, very angry. A lot of resentment towards the United States government for broken treaties, its treatment, conditions that we exist. So they tore up the BIA building. Man, you should have seen the desks, the files, everything was broken. It wasn't a pleasant scene. There was so much anger among the troops. They tore them. They said that we were talking. They said, if they start to come in, we're going to burn this building down. And See, that happened 1972. And I'm just telling you, I'm sharing what I witnessed. So if the FBI is listening to what I'm saying, that happened 52 years ago. So you can't try to prosecute for something that I'm just telling what happened. And of course, they sent their informants into the building, and they were able to become part of encourage all that. And then when we left, see, up to that point, the 20-point position paper was a document that was developed for that meeting that was supposed to happen with Richard Nixon. And he won the election by a landslide, but he didn't want to meet with the Indians. In fact, I think he told the FBI that this group, it needs to be investigated, arrest all of them. If there's two of them standing together talking, that's a conspiracy. Throw them in jail. So that was what they planned to do. But they gave $66,000 to the movement to get home on gas money, and all that gas money was distributed to everybody who was driving a vehicle. We got money to buy gas to get home. So that was something that Richard Nixon, I guess, told John Ehrlichman and Bob Hedelman, something that happened years later in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I was visiting the state capitol. I was going to visit Senator John Pinto to have him introduce legislation to protect the sweat lodge and the prisons. So we're at this restaurant. There's a very popular Mexican restaurant in Santa Fe, right by the railroad. And we went there at noon. Oh, it was crowded. So we had to wait by the front entrance in the lobby. And then there were some chairs or couch in that room, but further back. So I'm standing there with Senator John Pinto and Chile Ozzie, tribal council from Navajo Nation. So I'm looking over there and I see this white guy. He's sitting there. He's a white man. He kept looking at me. He just kept, I said, who the hell was this? I wonder if that's the FBI. He kept looking. He had a beard, white beard. He kind of had long hair, wearing a coat and tie. So because he's eyeballing me so hard, I decided just to walk over to him. I put my hand on and I introduced myself. Then I recognized him. I said, this is John Ehrlichman, Watergate. Nixon, Tricky Dick Nixon's one of his henchmen. And that was John Ehrlichman that was eyeballing me. So I shook his hand, we talked. Then he says, I told him, I said, I was with the American Indian Movement. We took over your BIA building in 1972, and we fought your U.S. Marshals at Wounded Knee, 1973. And he says to me, oh, I remember that well. You guys were a pain in the ass. That was how he looked at the American Indian Movement. But he acknowledged it, though, by saying that, given the respect that they were afraid of AIM. And that was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, years later. And then I told Dennis Banks and Russell Means, Vernon Balcourt. Boy, they got a big kick out of that. Really? You talked to John Ehrlichman, Watergate? And he said that. I said, yeah. He said, well, that's a compliment. I said, I know it. So that was something years later. We met some of the opposition. They were our adversaries, but they respected AIM. So that was just an experience where our paths crossed. And that was in the 1990s. And by then I was already doing my work in the prisons. Like I mentioned, I Sundance with Leonard Peltier in 1975. And that was one of the very first. There was only one Sundance in Indian country at that time. That was at Crow Dog's Paradise. First, it was at Pine Ridge, and then they moved it to Crow Dog's Paradise. Now there's Sundances everywhere. You have it in the Southwest, you got it in Texas, you got it even, I think even in the Southeast, Michigan, places like that, where they never had sun dances, but now that it's spread, movement was played a key role of that ancient ceremonial practice, the Lakotas, it spread, and I heard it's even in Germany, France, places like that where they never had that, but that it was taken over there. Mexico, South America, they have the Sundance now. So that's how much influence American Indian Movement had on the Indian world, the indigenous world, and we're comrades with the Maoris from New Zealand, with the Aborigines from Australia, with the native Hawaiians from Hawaii, even some of the Japanese people I knew or something like that. They're indigenous. And then others from South America, the Mapuches, the Quechuas, Amaris. I even had an opportunity to take a beautiful painting that Leonard Peltier made of Evo Morales. Now I took it to Cochabamba, Bolivia, and handed over to Evo Morales, the president, indigenous president of Bolivia. And it was a painting that Leonard Peltier made of Evo Morales. And it was a big one, big painting. And they put it in a case. I took it from Albuquerque, New Mexico, got on the plane, and I went to, I think it was Houston, Texas. Then Houston, I flew down to La Paz, and I got off the plane. Oh, that thin air, La Paz, so it's maybe 12, 14,000 feet. It's a thin air. I got off the plane and it was like, oh, I had to catch my breath. And then I adjusted to it. And some of the people, I guess they boil this coca leaf. They boil it and then cool it down. I drank it here. So this will help you breathe better, and you'll adjust your breathing to the altitude here. So I went to I arrived there. I left Albuquerque, New Mexico on I think it was a Friday, Thursday morning. I took that painting that Leonard Peltier had made of Evo Morales. I took it on the plane, and then I flew all night, got to La Paz. Then La Paz, I took another plane to Cochabamba. And there, the representative from the Bolivian embassy, the staff assistant, Evo Morales, met me at the airport. I got in with him. He took me to this hotel. And he said, what do you got there? And I unzipped that case. I showed him the painting that Leonard Peltier had made. Oh, it was beautiful. He said, this is for our leader. I said, yes. And then I told him about Leonard Peltier. So the meeting was set up for Monday morning at 10 a.m. So I had to wait all 2 days. But he told me this representative, his name was Sergio. He was an Amari Indian. He told me, he says, don't leave the hotel. Stay in the lobby. Don't be running around outside. People will recognize you're not from here. You might get kidnapped. They might ask for too much money. So stay inside. So that's what I did. And that was kind of hard. You're in I guess Cochabamba, you know, over 1 million people. I wanted to go out and check out the city, the streets. But the staff assistant of Evo Morales said, don't go out there, just stay here. I'll come back and check on you for 2 days. I just waited around, and finally Monday morning after breakfast, he took me to this real nice building where the government buildings, there was a helicopter landed. They had like a pad where the helicopter would land, and then out of there, I seen Evo Morales getting out of the helicopter. He came in, a lot of people were around him, and they came in the building. I was in that building, I was sitting there. And he said, "You're the first one on the list, you're gonna talk with him." I said, "All right." So at 10 o'clock, they motioned to me, "Come on." I can't remember what they call him, Comandante or General. No, he wasn't General. But he had a name that they apply to him out of respect. So I went in. I don't speak Spanish, so it's kind of difficult moment for me. You know, I don't want to try to speak Spanish and it sound like a Chicano Spanish English, you know. So I don't want to do that. So I shook hands with him. I just said, "Yate." He looked at me. Then we had an interpreter. It was a woman. She interpret. So she introduced me to him and told him that I administer a program that goes into the prisons in the United States prison system and conduct ancient ceremonial practice, sweat lodge, cleansing and purification ceremony. And we pray with the pipe, chanupa, and use kaniknik or herbs and sing songs and prayers. Boy, he was fascinated with that. He looked at me, he looked me up and down, and I think he thought I was a
What happened?
I think his internet, can you hear him or just me?
It'll probably come back. He just froze for a
Look,
second.
sounds like he froze. Yeah.
Sometimes we
call
need to- Go ahead and call him and then we'll see if,
a medicine.
He's right there. There you go.
Man, I had to correct him. I said, "No, I'm not a medicine man." I don't know. No, go over there. Go over there. Hello.
You froze up for a second, Lenny, so I tried to call you. Just ignore that.
What happened? Are we still on? Am I still on? Okay, I'm gonna get off this phone. So anyway, my meeting with Evo Morales, I explained to him that we need his help. Obama was a president.
I don't want to call him again.
It is 6:36.
So I explained to Evo Morales that we need his help. We can roll here.
yeah, there's a little delay, but there you are. Mr. Foster, you're frozen. So we'll wait here for a minute, and if not, you might need to disconnect and reconnect if you can hear me.
Let me know if you want me to call him.
How much time do we got?
Oops. Did we lose him? Okay. Just a moment. I'll give him a call and just ask him to reconnect. Does anyone see him here in the discussion? Okay, one moment.
You know, Lenny was talking about seeing Evo Morales. We also had some young Native people that went to Cuba and took eagle feather and presented it to Fidel and talked to him about the struggle and what Fidel could do. But given the situation between the United States and Cuba, whatever Fidel offered was never accepted or appreciated by anybody but people in the movement. So there's been many places where people have gone. His daughter accepted an award, a human rights award for Leonard in Spain. So Leonard's case is, you know, pretty much worldwide. And Michael Koch, who's on with us, is one of the major representatives of Leonard in Germany. So it's actually more people in overseas that understand and know about Leonard than there are here in the United States, where people have a tendency to be anti-Indian and not wanting to understand about the question of sovereignty and, you know, tribal treaties with the US government.
Michael Koch will also be with us December 6th as a special guest.
Lenny's coming back in.
Okay. Am I back on?
Yes,
What happened?
you froze up the whole thing. They were so interested in what you were saying, they
Well,
froze your
I
computer.
wanna finish that because it was very interesting that a world leader like Evo Morales would take a strong interest in the case of Leonard Peltier. And I explained to him, we need his help. And whether he sent a letter to Obama, I don't know. We never received any. It could have been intercepted. It could have been, you know, the State Department or FBI again could have intercepted that letter from Evo Morales. But the point I'm making is that Evo Morales knew of Leonard, and he really appreciated that painting that Leonard drew. You know, Leonard is a very talented artist. He's very gifted, self-taught. He's well-read. And I feel bad that he's experiencing health problems. And he's going to be 78 years old here in a few days, September. And so it's important that we get him out. I'm sure that it will happen. I'm a strong believer in the prayers. You know, we've even had a Native American church peyote ceremony for him. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear what I'm saying?
We can hear you. Go
Okay.
on, we're listening.
Okay, anyway, that we had a peyote ceremony on behalf of Leonard Peltier. And it's a tough one. We looked in the fireplace. We made offerings to the fireplace with some cedar smoke, and we smoked some tobacco in the morning, prayed with the water. And the roadman, Kibi Gay, told me that this case of Leonard Peltier, because we're fighting the government, it's a very tough, very tough. It's like a throwback to when our ancestors were fighting the cavalry back in the 1860s, 1870s, when they took a whole company to capture Geronimo. Then they convinced him to surrender. Then they took him to San Carlos and lied to him. Then they put the iron chains, the leg irons and handcuffs, and put him on the train. And all the scouts that helped the cavalry, they put him in prison too. And they put Geronimo, first it was Florida, and then they sent him to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He spent his remaining years in prison. He never went home. But I don't see that happening with Leonard Peltier. You know, we got to continue to have faith, we can continue to pray. One of my thoughts, see, I give thoughts to this a lot. I pray a lot. I pray for all of you. And one of the thoughts I had about Leonard's release is that he could be a goodwill ambassador for Indian nations. He could be a goodwill ambassador with the National Congress of American Indians and work with the states at the United Nations, not a NGO status or civil society status, but a recognition of a world leader, a goodwill ambassador of the Indian nations. And I think he could serve as that capacity, or be an art teacher at the schools, high school, be a counsel, but he needs rest. He needs to just take it easy. You know, being in a Supermax facility where he's been, Leavenworth, Lewisburg, Coleman, that's intense, very intense. Isolation, humiliation, sensory deprivation is what they call that. Sensory deprivation, where they try to break a man's will to live. They haven't done that to him. They might have tried to break his will by humiliating him, by trying to disgrace him, denying him certain rights, telephone calls, visits, lawyer visits, advocates, friends, relatives, to receive mail, to go outside and get some fresh air, sunlight. And, you know, they cut me off from him. Said, no more sweat lodges. You and Leonard Peltier are friends. The rules and regulations of the Federal Bureau of Prisons and their orientation and their workshop is friends and relatives can't conduct sweat lodge ceremonies and pipe ceremony for their relatives in prison. I told him, I said, Leonard is a Ojibwe, Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa in Dakota. I'm a Navajo. We're not related by blood. We're friends, yeah. But how else how can you not become his friend after 40 years of visiting him? But the white man, the warden, you know, it's very rare that a warden will call. When I used to work with the corrections project, it was just a project, it wasn't a department. Somebody said it was a department. It wasn't a department. The program that I implemented was based on the number of, there's so many Navajos, citizens, young men, women are in prison, state prison, federal prisons. There were more Navajos in the federal prison system than any other tribes in the country. So that was the reason I implemented wrote up a proposal, a grant, approached different funding sources, put a budget with it and got it funded. So they gave me an office there, right there with the Navajo Nation tribal government, and allowed me to travel throughout Western United States, visit prisons, state prisons, federal penitentiaries, build sweat lodges, do ceremonies. I did that for 37 years, from 1981 to 2018. I went all over. And one of my clients and patient was Leonard Peltier. And I tried to keep that under the radar. And they finally, somebody, I think it was the chaplain at Lewisburg. I think he's the one that told the warden at Coleman that Lenny Foster comes in to see Leonard Peltier and conduct sweat lodge ceremonies for him. We got to deny that. So the warden called me. He said, we're going to have to disapprove any more ceremonies, because we know you're coming in here to pray with Leonard Peltier. You know the rules and regulations. Because I went to orientation workshop for that every year. They do NCIC background check. They do all kinds of checks on you. Even a speeding ticket, parking ticket will prohibit you from able to go into the prison system. But I never had any of those. So I was able to visit him for 37 years. And so getting back to Evo Morales, boy, he was very happy to receive that painting from Leonard. And then he gave me this carving. It was about 2 feet. It was a carving like a wood, either ebony or hardwood that one of his people carved, a warrior of his Ameri Nation, Ameri tribe. He gave it to me and told me to give it to Leonard Peltier. So I brought it back with me. And I got to the airport in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Peter Clark at that time was running the Leonard Peltier Defense Offense Committee. So I gave it to him. I said, we need to give this to Leonard Peltier when he gets out, or give it to his family. And I think he gave it to Chauncey. So right now, Chauncey has that, it's a wooden art statue. And the times that I went to the National Congress of American Indians, which is the largest federally recognized Indian organization in the United States, I approached them with a request to do a presentation, ask for a resolution of support for Leonard Peltier. I've done that 2-3 times. Once in Portland, Oregon, once in Phoenix, Arizona, and once in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So that's on record. But I think there's something going on, because when Jody Gillette was the staff assistant, the Indian desk for Obama's administration, I contacted her. Her name is Jody Gillette, and she worked as an Indian staff assistant for Obama. Now I asked her that can you set up a meeting with Obama to discuss? She said, for what? What for? I said, I want to meet with Obama to talk about Leonard Peltier. We need his help. There's a resolution that's been passed. She said she would. So I get this call. She said that Obama agreed to it. So I got all happy. I said, I'll be there. Can you make it to DC? I said, yeah, I'll be there Thursday. But she said, we'll meet Friday afternoon. Come in the east or the west wing there in DC. So I said, okay. So I got into DC. I checked into a hotel. Then I took the taxi down to the White House on the west wing. So I went up to the gate, and I invited Stephanie Autumn. So she was in town at that time too. I said, "You want to come to a meeting with me? We're going to meet with President Obama to discuss Leonard Peltier." She said, "Okay." She said, "How'd you do that?" I said, "I just called Jody Gillette. She's a staff assistant, the native staff assistant." So I took a taxi. We met at the gate like 30 minutes early. So I was there, and right at 1:30, right before 1:30, we walked up to the gate and showed them their ID. Then they were going to escort us inside. They said they can't do that because they can't find a memo. Get this. Just a few days before that, there was a memo that approved that meeting here Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock Friday afternoon. That memo disappeared. So I called Jody from the outside. She said, "I'll come out and meet you." So she came out, came through the gate, and we went across the street. There was a restaurant. This is in Washington, D.C. now. And I think it was 2016 or 2017. Anyway, so I sat down with her. I said, "What happened?" He said, "Some of the people in the Obama administration, they don't want him talking to any Indians on Leonard Peltier." So I realized that that's how serious and how far up the scale our quest for freedom, justice for Leonard Peltier is at the highest level of the government. They removed that memo approving a meeting to discuss Leonard Peltier's executive clemency. And all this time we thought Obama was going to do it. We thought, "Oh, Obama, he's going to be our champion. He's going to be the one that's going to do it." Didn't happen. So the struggle continues. Right now, there's a walk from Minneapolis, the American Indian Movement Governing Council, Rachel Thunder, Lisa Bellinger, Frank Paro, those people. The younger generation, I can't walk. My back hurts. My knees are not good. No football injuries, car accident. The years take its toll. So, but I pray for them that they'll converge in DC on November 14th. So keep them in your prayers. I don't think we need divisions. We don't need animosity. To me, Leonard Peltier and fighting among them. So I don't want to see that, but that seems to be what's going on. But we need to get Leonard out. I see that it'll happen. It'll happen. And I think we just need to continue what we're doing to help. I'm very hopeful for Kevin Sharp, our attorney, and people like Paulette, who's been involved with this for years and years, and others. I thought I seen David Hill's name on there. I guess he left, but there's others, and I appreciate what is it, Donna Lawson, Kimberly, LaFron boys. That's you? Oh, okay. People like that. I never met. I just talked with them over the phone. I appreciate your support, your prayers, and continue to support Leonard Peltier. So if there's any questions, I guess that be the extent of what I got to say. And then I want to pray, that when I introduce myself at the beginning, I should have made a prayer to begin this, but I'll end it with a prayer. But before all of that, if anybody has any questions, this is the time to share those thoughts, concerns, questions. But what I shared with you is my experience. Like I said, Leonard is very gifted, very talented. He's a writer also. He's got 2 books out. Spirit of Crazy Horse, he collaborated with Peter Matheson, and also I think it was my prison writings. Sundance is my life. My prayer, I think that's what it is. Harvey Arden. So he's written those. So that demonstrates to me he's self-taught. He keeps up with things. He's very smart. He has a real good sense of humor. I always look forward to doing the sweat lodge with him, praying. He loves the sweat lodge, and he has a very nice pipe. I don't know, a lot of people don't know when he first ended up in prison, he fought for the sweat lodges. He fought for the right to have access to the sweat lodge and have a pipe. That was Marion, USP Marion. So that people don't know that about him, but he supported amendments to American Indian Religious Freedom amendments, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, some of these laws that were developed and implemented by for Native Americans using. So that struggle still continues. We need to protect our sacred items, the access to the sweat lodge, the pipe, to have a traditional meal, singing and dancing, powwow, singing. Like I said, Leonard is he's a mentor to the younger inmates. He's a revered elder, and even some of the guards, they give him that respect. Of course, there's some that don't. I've seen in Lewisburg where the guards were very racist. They say things to the Indian boys, even myself. But if I complain, which I thought maybe I should do that, but they lie. They lie. They'll say, they'll lie and say, and then they get me thrown out of the system. They turn around and lie. So that was I know how they operate. See, you complain about a certain guard being racist and discriminating against you, and you make a complaint against them, they'll throw you out or they'll ship you out. For me, they would have blackballed me. They would have said that I was in there causing trouble or something. But as it was, somebody ratted me off anyway. Said I was coming into the prison to run sweat lodge ceremony just for Leonard Peltier. That's not true. There's a lot of Indian boys in prison. I went to visit as many as I could to teach, to instruct, and have talking circles, pray, sweat, and they're all over. Atlanta, Georgia, Coleman, Florida, Fort Dix, New Jersey, Lewisburg, Allenwood, Leavenworth, El Reno, Florence, Colorado. Florence, Colorado, that's the Supermax, ADX. That one is a real, once you go inside the building, once you pass the front lobby, you either go down the stairs, it's like a tunnel. You can't hear nothing. And it's underground. And once you get inside one of the units, you can't hear anything. And talk about sensory deprivation. And you can't see nothing. There's no windows. It's subterranean. And it's ADX. That's the supermax of the supermax. And I used to go in there. I built a sweat lodge with Chaplain Keith Powley. We did that. And I had an issue arise at one point. I did that for 30 years.
Lenny,
Yes.
Lenny, we would like you to end with a prayer as the time is
Okay.
running out, and we don't want to lose this prayer from
Okay.
you on
Al-
Zoom. And
Also-
then
Okay.
Estelle,
Thank you.
Yes, I have a quick thing, Miss Lenny. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but
Yes.
since we've run over time and we have some questions,
Oh,
we would
sorry.
love to invite you to come back
Yeah.
and then-
Okay.
and you can answer those questions. We would love that.
Yeah. I would be honored to do that.
We would-
Behejondo les kodon kemas stans is pecado di conja tanatasen. Terezenebe yana nit eto ashon shitrat yinlon ha ashada ana anaokos. Behejon yitate behejon yikere behejon yare behejon yikara anil skotikon. Yineu nadi kon beyat behejon na screen. I don't yikadem long bened name. Aro di kon yezda the halon the kon yanalaken yitoke. Ebedel neo betet sedils and doles. Di kon koro chanalaketu kon be between. But Tedesaniba ya be behind lado les ashonis at in long ekut abat sedesen. Aro but high jagi out. The stone di kon but sedesen. Tedesanid with a behind la. Aro di kon anilsko. Di kon Paulette. Aro di kon Tate. Aro di kon Catherine. Aro Dusk. Aro di kon Diane. Aro di kon Estella. Aro also. Egut al bahas zido batsedesen. Citizen eyat behind lado les assion de sitcot. Die in long, die in jut die in jopai, die in hazoni. Die kon ben jono. Nan hit zilo ben jono tanane kisto. Sisna jin chot zeto ko sleet benza. Zet vakado tohat as long chebel be ben hit zilo ben hit sketo les assion de sitcot. Die in long. Ekon kut out, aro di konsenai, Leonard Peltier, Venasne. What citizen? Eight citizen, good up behind Lado. USP, Coleman wonder, Satakat. Aro di kon citizen, behind Lado. Ekut out, Venasne. Behind Law. Bindi Juana Dato, Ashon, the Satrat, in long. Di kon turtle mountain band of Chippewas, though. Now, but not the end long, 80 kut out. Sik espet de snow bijna snow, wat ze is en. Goed als zo'n de die in long, die in jut, die in jo bij, die in hazoni. Goed ba een la, ben die Juana, not dat ben die zono bana tien. Ado die kon trache, goed chul be niet nieuw, be die in on gaan la, ado die kon het oostzet. Esto goed chul het is een Ilia. En je zin wat is staan, en je zag wat is staan, het is een nestlindo. Ik word uit, ik kon also zitten in long, de laatste stad dan long, ik word uit, bahas wat zit is, en ados ik edo, die word uit bij nasni, ga zet na hokus, bij hezon nestling, bij hezon nestling, bij hezon nestling, bij hezon nestling, oh.
Gwitch, thank you.
Oh, bears on the sleigh, bears on the sleigh. Behes on the screen, behes on the screen. Oh, Matako, I see all my relations.
Oh, thank
Oh.
you, Lenny. Thank you. So wonderful to hear you.
Thank you. And
Thank
we-
you, and we look
Thank you.
forward to having you again. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Maybe next week or 2 weeks.
I'll get a hold of you, okay? And we'll arrange it. So thank you again. It's been such a pleasure.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you for that prayer, Lenny.